Well, it's ambiguous. It's undecidable. The Prophet ﷺ did not say, don't have a state. But on the other hand, he didn't say, have a state. He said neither. And I wrote an article about this and about Usama ibn Zayd and Zayd ibn Haritha and so on. And see, what modern statists forget is that although the Prophet ﷺ sort of had a state, in the sense that he had a city-state in Medina for a few years. Like the Prophet's authority in the oasis of Medina would say would be pretty solidly established by the year 6 or so. And then after that, it became a territorial state only really in the last 2 years of his life. So it didn't exist for long enough to establish a stable state. But the other thing is that it was very rudimentary, because it was the type of state that mushroomed out of an atmosphere where there had never been a state before. And that is similar to the mushrooming of the Mongol Empire in Central Asia later. And the mushrooming up of the state was based on very few institutions. So we can cite from the Quran that the Quran says in Surah 33, if you come to have dinner at the Prophet's residence, eat and get up and leave, and do not hang around hoping for a conversation, or actually it even says in the Quran, hoping for a hadith, which is the conversation, or maybe a hadith. That would annoy the Prophet, but he would be too shy to tell you, but God is not afraid of the truth. Well, we learn from that the Prophet had no chamberlain. There was no protocol, and there was no chamberlain, and there was no nothing. And then when we find in Surah Al-Hujurat, where it says, don't raise your voices shouting to the Prophet to come out, because the last couple of years, especially in the year of deputation, the year before the Prophet died, where some of these tribal people came in, and they would shout, Muhammad, come out! And so there was still, even at that late date, there was no protocol, no nothing. Now, what officials did the Prophet appoint? The Prophet didn't appoint any officials in Medina except that he left a Khalifa when he left the city on an expedition. So he left somebody in charge. That was it. And furthermore, most of the traditions about that say that he appointed Ibn Maktoum, the blind man, and that of course might or might not be true. And then when Mecca surrendered, he appointed Attab ibn Asid to be the governor of Mecca. And that was the first time there was ever an appointment that was outside of Medina. And when Khaybar surrendered, what did they do to that? He sent out an official called the Kharras, and the people of Khaybar killed the Kharras. And so then that created a little, mini political crisis that had to be solved. But the Kharras was just somebody who went out to take the stuff and come back. There was no garrison, there was no governor in the place. What kind of a territorial state was that? And so there was, and let alone hadiths that say, that a little girl would take his hand and wander around the town with him, whether that's true or not. And you just have very little organization actually, and that lack of organization remains in the early caliphate, where you find that it's said that Omar appointed a qadi, but it's also said he did not, and I'm quite sure he did not, and that is the true version about that. And then you find that the argument over the property of the state being separate from the personal property of the ruler was a problem, and so that was part of the argument over the Mirath Fatima, the inheritance of Fatima and Abu Bakr. And then later on, you find that the issue with Uthman and the murder of Uthman, that there was the problem also that Uthman was saying, I will take what I want from this money and give it to whom I want, because I'm the ruler, so I can do what I want. And the objection to that was, no, it's the state money, not the personal money, and so on. But then you get down to the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz in the year 100, and there still isn't any distinction. between the property of the state and the personal possession of the caliph. There's still no distinction. That is one of the reforms of Omar II. So the whole idea of the kind of institutional state people want to build who are state builders, there's no precedent for that whatsoever. And furthermore, we modern people are incapable of understanding a situation where the state is so absent as it was there, as we live here with our intrusive state. And the state is intrusive in intent, if not in reality, everywhere. And today. But in the past, it was not like that at all. There was virtually no intervention in it. Even when I visited Upper Egypt, the first time I went to the village that had no electricity, and later they got the electricity, and the villagers were self-governing. They didn't have any interventions. I mean, they had someone who was formerly the mayor and was in charge of the, guard the village at night and stuff around the village, but there wasn't any regulation. It's a town of like 2,600 people, and there was no. I mean, if you compare that with, say, a town of 2,600 people in the States, you'd have, the police department, a fire department, and all kinds of institutions. They had no institutions, nothing. And there we are in 1980 or something. That's the situation. So there's this kind of informality that existed, which modern, statized people can hardly imagine.